It was Christmas Eve, and I stood outside my family's home, holding a pie I had baked myself. The lights were glowing warmly from inside, laughter spilled through the windows, and my husband sat at the table next to my sister. But the front door, it was locked. My calls went unanswered. My name wasn't mentioned. I wasn't invited. I wasn't wanted. That night, something broke. Not because they forgot me, but because I finally realized they never saw me at all. And while they toasted their secrets inside, I started crafting my escape, quietly, methodically. Because you don't fight a war with noise, you win it with strategy. I used to believe that being indispensable was a kind of love, that if they couldn't do without me, they must value me. So I became what they needed. I was the chauffeur when Mom had her late-night ER visits. I was the wallet when Brad, my older brother, burned through his third failed business. I was the shield when Sophie messed up at school, or with men, or with rent. Every crisis came with a text, "Claire, you're the only one we can count on." And every time I came running, no questions, no thanks, just a new wound dressed in a smile. I told myself it was family. That love meant sacrifice, that if I held them up long enough, they'd one day turn around and hold me back. But that moment never came. Mom would call in the middle of my workday, frantic about something minor, a billing error, a missed delivery, and I'd drop meetings to fix it. Once, she called me while I was on a date to tell me she couldn't find the cat. I left the table, apologized to my date, drove 40 minutes to her house, only to find Mr. Whiskers asleep under the bed. Mom didn't even look surprised. "You always overreact," she said, like I was the unreasonable one for caring. At family dinners, I played peacekeeper, mediator, nurse, accountant. My name was never on the invitations because of course I'd come. Of course Claire would handle the mess. She always did. I became a fixture, a function, like the thermostat or the garbage disposal, present, essential, unnoticed. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, little imbalances disguised as love. "Claire, can you just cover this one time?" "Claire, I didn't want to tell Mom. You know how she is. Could you break the news gently?" "Claire, you're the calm one." It all sounded like trust, but it was a trap. I remember one Thanksgiving, Sophie cried because her boyfriend dumped her. Everyone circled around her, offered tissues and wine, while I cleaned up the kitchen alone. I had made the dinner, I bought the groceries, I set the table. No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed when I slipped away early. And I still told myself I mattered. Then came the photos, or rather, the lack of them. One evening, scrolling through Mom's Facebook, I saw the holiday albums, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, pictures of the table, the decorations, the family, smiling faces lit with warmth. My face was never among them. At first, I thought maybe I'd missed the shot. But the pattern repeated, 20 pictures, not one of me. In fact, most times I was holding the camera, capturing their joy, not included in it. The strangest part? No one seemed to notice, not even me, until too late. It wasn't just the photos, it was everything. I was the errand girl, the emergency contact, the one who remembered birthdays, sent thank you cards, stocked the fridge when someone was sick. But when it came time for anyone to remember me, silence. Sophie once posted a video on TikTok. "My sister is the strongest, most amazing woman I know." I cried when I saw it. Finally, I thought, finally she sees me. 3 days later, she asked me for $15,000 to open a skincare boutique. I gave her the money. She never mentioned the video again. And yet I still showed up for her launch party. I brought a handmade flower arrangement. Her thank you. You're a lifesaver. I honestly don't know what I'd do without you. That line again. The same loop, the same cage. Then, a week before my birthday, I found out from a mutual friend that Sophie was throwing a party. A big one. Catered, decorated, with music and a guest list. Everyone in the family was invited, except me. I texted her. Heard about your party. What can I bring? No reply. I called Mom. She hesitated, then said, well, Sophie wanted to keep it intimate. You know, just friends. I was stunned. I'm not her friend? She chuckled. Oh, Claire, don't be dramatic. You're always so busy. You wouldn't have come anyway. I hung up, and for the first time in years, I didn't cry, because in that moment, something shifted. The invisible weight I'd been carrying began to crack. I realized what had always been true. I was only useful to them as long as I stayed silent, compliant, invisible. I wasn't the perfect daughter. I was the permanent backup plan. The snow was falling gently, the kind that looked like powdered sugar dusting everything it touched. My boots crunched against the driveway as I approached the front door, one hand gripping the pie dish I'd baked that morning, the other adjusting the scarf I knew Mom liked. My heart pounded, not with excitement, but with hope. Just one night, I told myself, one night where maybe they'd remember I was family. The porch light was on. Laughter floated through the windows. I could hear the clinking of glasses, the muffled hum of Nat King Cole's The Christmas Song. I pressed the doorbell. Nothing. I knocked. Again, still nothing. My breath came out in foggy bursts. I shifted the pie to my other arm and knocked louder. A full minute passed before I tried the doorknob. Locked. I leaned down to peer through the front window, the one next to the living room. And that's when I saw them. My mother on the couch, wrapped in the red shawl I gave her last Christmas. Sophie on the floor in front of her, laughing, glass of wine in hand. And Ethan, my husband, seated comfortably in the armchair, his hand resting on Sophie's shoulder. My stomach flipped. I knocked again, harder this time. The sound was swallowed by the warmth inside. No one moved. I took out my phone and texted Sophie. I'm outside. Can someone open up? Seen, no reply. I tried Ethan next. I'm here, front door's locked. Seen, still nothing. I stood there in disbelief, fingers stiffening from the cold. After a few more minutes, I walked back to the window. That's when Ethan turned his head and saw me. He paused. For one full, infinite second, our eyes met. Then he reached up and drew the curtain closed. The wind bit through my coat, and something inside me crumbled. Not because I'd been left out, but because they wanted me left out. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I stepped off the porch, down the walkway, and onto the street. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stand there like a forgotten package. Across the road, there was a small park with a bench under a tree. I walked over, sat down, placed the pie beside me, and stared at the house, glowing like a lie. Everything felt suddenly absurd. The matching Christmas pajamas I'd ordered weeks ago. The secret Santa gifts I had wrapped and labeled. The card I wrote to Ethan about how this year we'd finally prioritize us. I pulled out my phone again, opened a blank text to Mom. I wrote, "Why? What did I do to deserve this? Why would you lock me out on Christmas? You knew I was coming. I baked the pie you asked for. I stared at the blinking cursor, then hit backspace until the message disappeared. I thought about calling Danny, an old college friend who had once said, "If you ever need to talk, really talk, call me." I tapped her name. The phone rang once. I hung up. I wasn't ready to speak. Not yet, maybe not ever. A car passed by, its headlights brushing my face. I looked down and realized my hands were shaking. I wasn't sure if it was the cold or what was breaking inside me. I opened my banking app, half thinking I'd order a car or book a hotel. That's when I saw it. A recent transaction from our joint account. $30,000, sent 3 days ago. Recipient, Sophie Mitchell. My fingers trembled harder as I clicked into the details. Memo, Seed Money Skincare Boutique. I didn't remember approving this. We were supposed to make all big financial decisions together. That had been our agreement after the last time he loaned his friend $10,000 without asking. He lied. Again. To help her again. I sat there, stunned. The cold no longer just in my skin. It was in my bones. They weren't just excluding me. They were replacing me. I didn't sleep that night. By the time I made it home, the pie was a frozen mess in the passenger seat. I left it there, walked straight to my laptop, turned it on, and opened a blank Word document. At the top, I typed 2 words in bold: reclamation plan. It felt absurd at first, like I was starting a business or building a brand. But the truth was, I had lost something more valuable than money or image. I had lost myself. And now I was reclaiming every inch of me they'd chipped away at. I started with bank statements, 3 years' worth. Transactions Ethan swore were mutual decisions. Charges he labeled family emergencies. I found 5 separate transfers to Sophie, each labeled gift or investment, none of which I ever knew about. I opened old emails, scrolled through group chats, scanned photo folders. One by one, pieces of the puzzle emerged, not as isolated memories, but a pattern of erosion. Of them taking, of me giving, and of everyone pretending it was normal. Then came the recordings. I didn't even realize I had them. Voicemails from Mom, sharp and sweet in turns. One that stood out: "Claire, stop acting like you're owed something just because you've helped. That's what family does, help. Now I need you to wire $2,500 by Friday. Brad's under a lot of pressure." That voice used to make me feel guilty. Now it made me feel angry. I dug deeper, accessed old files I hadn't touched in years. A scan of the deed to my grandparents' house, the one we grew up in, the one Mom sold, because no one wanted to maintain it. Except the deed wasn't in her name, it was in mine. Confused, I searched further and found the legal transfer, a document signed 2 years ago. My signature at the bottom, only I never remembered signing anything. My chest tightened. I searched my email for anything from that time, and there it was, an automated message from a law firm. Subject line: e-document signing confirmation, power of attorney. I clicked. The PDF was there. A power of attorney giving my mother full control over my inherited assets. Dated, stamped, and marked with my digital signature. But I never signed that. Or maybe I did. Maybe it was during one of those rushed visits home, when she handed me some legal stuff for taxes. Maybe I didn't read it. Maybe I trusted her. That was the worst part, not that they betrayed me, but that I had handed them the knife. Just then, another email popped up. Subject: verification request, Mitchell and Rayner Law Office. Body: Dear Ms. Claire Mitchell, we are following up to confirm your request to modify your 2021 financial delegation agreement. Please respond to verify the request. I froze. They were still using my name, still moving under the assumption that I wouldn't notice. but I had, and I wouldn't look away again. The next day, I made 3 appointments: a lawyer, a therapist, and a financial advisor. It felt strange saying the words out loud for the first time. I believe my family is financially and emotionally abusing me. But as soon as I said it, the room shifted. The lawyer leaned forward. The advisor started typing. The therapist just nodded gently, as if she'd heard this story before. I started assembling a team, not of warriors, but of protectors. People who didn't want to fix me, just help me build a defense. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to explain and started preparing. I found out my aunt, my mother's sister, had cut contact years ago. I reached out. She responded the same night. We met the next morning. Over tea, she told me everything. She had once invested in a business with Mom, only to discover her name had been used to open credit lines without consent. When she confronted her, Mom claimed miscommunication. But the debt remained, and the relationship shattered. I wasn't the first, I wasn't special, I was just next. With her help, I began piecing together a timeline. Contracts Mom had signed on my behalf, phone numbers tied to my credit, utility bills addressed to properties I didn't know I owned. It became clear this wasn't a family, it was a syndicate, and I had been their favorite asset. I started documenting everything: screenshots, emails, voice memos, receipts. I uploaded it all into a private drive, labeled and dated, a living archive of betrayal. And yet, between the meetings and the files, something unexpected began to happen. In a quiet corner of a community center, during a guided meditation, I found myself crying, not because I was broken, but because for the first time I felt real, separate, not as Claire the daughter, Claire the wife, Claire the savior, just Claire. I cried because I was still here, because I hadn't disappeared, no matter how invisible they tried to make me. When I got home that night, I found a thick envelope in the mailbox, return address, Ethan Ross. Inside, divorce papers, no note, just legal formality. And on the final page, under division of assets, a footnote. All joint accounts to remain with petitioner until further notice. He didn't even bother to ask, because to him, I was never a person to love, just a resource to manage. I didn't want fireworks, no confrontation, no yelling matches, no public meltdowns. I just wanted the truth to breathe. That was enough. It always had been. Mom's 70th birthday was in February. She planned a grand party at the country club, champagne brunch, live quartet, pastel centerpieces shaped like swans. I was invited this time, not because she wanted me there, but because she needed appearances maintained. I RSVP'd yes, and then I got to work. Each family member received a custom email from me the night before the party. Subject line, a small gift before tomorrow. Inside, a brief message. I thought you deserved a chance to understand before everyone else did. Beneath it, a single link to a private Google Drive folder labeled with their name. Brad's folder had financial records, proof he had used my identity for loans, screenshots of emails between him and Ethan, negotiating how to move funds quietly from the joint account. Sophie's folder included texts she'd sent to a mutual friend. Claire is such a doormat, she doesn't even read half the stuff I send her to sign. Alongside it, the transfer records, the signed forged contracts. Mom's folder was heavier, recordings, dates, the e-signed power of attorney. voicemails where she threatened to cut me out of the family if I didn't keep helping Brad, and one particular email she sent to her best friend, Elaine. Claire thinks she's better than all of us now. She forgets who paid her tuition. Maybe it's time she learns what happens when she crosses me. The irony, I'd paid off my own student loans years ago, quietly, without help. I added a voice memo to each folder. My voice, calm, clear, unedited. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply told the truth. The next morning, I arrived at the country club wearing black. Not out of protest, just preference. A soft wool dress, tall boots, a coat that made me feel like armor. I didn't bring a gift. I had already given one. Mom spotted me from across the room and smiled like nothing had happened. Her dress sparkled under the chandelier. She hugged me too long. Her perfume was the same, strong, floral, invasive. Elaine, her best friend of 30 years, came up behind us, eyes a little too wide. "Claire," she said, "can we talk later?" I nodded. They served mimosas. A waiter passed by with deviled eggs and shrimp toast. The quartet played something French. I stood near the window and waited. It didn't take long. Elaine pulled me aside near the coat check. She looked pale. "I read everything," she whispered. "Your mother, she told me those accounts were your gift to the family." I believed her. I didn't say anything. She touched my arm. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, you've saved me too." She used my name to open a card at Nordstrom. I never noticed until last month. I blinked. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "Now I am." We didn't hug. It didn't need one. Just that moment. That shared breath. Back in the main hall, the birthday toast began. Brad raised a glass, eyes glassy. Sophie sat beside Ethan, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. And then Mom's phone buzzed. She picked it up, scrolled, froze. Slowly, she stood. "Who the hell do you think you are?" she shouted across the room. The quartet stopped playing. Everyone turned. She held up her phone. "This little bitch thinks she can come in here and ruin everything. None of this is true. None of it. It's all twisted lies." Silence fell like snow. I didn't move, didn't flinch. I simply said, "Then sue me." Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared. And then, as if realizing what she had just done in front of 60 people, she hurled her phone at the wall and stormed out. I left before dessert. In the days that followed, everything unraveled. Brad was suspended from his job, pending an investigation into fraudulent credit activity tied to his name and mine. Ethan was fired after HR found discrepancies in company expense reports, which matched transfers he'd made into Sophie's business. Sophie's skincare boutique closed within a week. Investors pulled out. The lease was terminated. And when she called the bank to refinance a personal loan under my guarantee, the rep told her that account was revoked. She messaged me 4 times. I didn't reply. What I didn't expect, though, was that the story would spread. Not because I told anyone, but because they did. One by one, people started talking. Extended relatives, neighbors, friends of friends. Everyone had a story, a suspicion, a memory. And suddenly, the narrative shifted, from Claire's always so dramatic to maybe Claire was just the only one paying attention. I sat in my apartment one evening, wrapped in a blanket, candle flickering beside me, and wrote a letter, not to them, to myself. Dear Claire, thank you for not becoming what they tried to make you. Thank you for choosing truth over revenge. Thank you for walking away without needing them to follow. You didn't win with fire, you won with light. I folded the letter, and tucked it into a book. The story wasn't over, but it finally belonged to me. I never imagined signing papers could feel like freedom, but it did. Line by line, I removed myself from every shared account, every legal tether, every backdoor they used to stay latched to my life. I revoked the power of attorney, closed the joint checking, had my name legally removed from property titles I never meant to own. It was a slow, meticulous unraveling, like peeling off a costume I'd worn so long I'd forgotten my own skin underneath. With each signature, I wasn't just protecting my finances, I was reclaiming my identity. For the first time in years, my name was mine alone. I didn't stop there. One afternoon, I opened a blank page and started writing. Not for revenge, not to expose anyone, but because I needed to tell the truth. For me, for anyone like me. I launched a blog under a pseudonym, just a simple, clean layout. No photos, no names, just stories. One post at a time, I recounted the small betrayals, the gaslighting, the emotional blackmail dressed up as motherly concern. I didn't accuse, I just described. I expected silence, maybe even trolls. But instead, something else happened. A woman commented anonymously on one of my posts. I thought I was the only one who signed a paper I didn't understand. Thank you. Another message came the next day, and then another, then one that stopped me cold. It was an email signed only M, she wrote. Reading your words helped me realize what my sister has been doing to me for years. The financial control, the guilt trips, I thought it was just family stuff. I didn't know it had a name. She ended with, "You didn't just speak for yourself, you saved me." I read her message 3 times before closing the laptop and sitting still for almost an hour. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, but whole. Then came the unexpected twist. An email from a nonprofit organization popped into my inbox. Families Reclaimed. They supported survivors of familial manipulation and emotional abuse. "We came across your writing," it began. "Would you consider joining us as a community advisor?" I stared at the screen. I had spent so much of my life feeling invisible, reduced to function and silence. Now my story, my voice, was being asked to help others find theirs. I said yes, of course I said yes. A few weeks later, Mom sent a letter, handwritten, formal but brittle at the edges. She wrote, "I never wanted any of this. I didn't know things would go so far. I only did what I thought was right for the family." There it was, the rewrite. The soft denial masked as concern. I called her once, just once, to respond. "I got your letter," I said, "but I have one question." Pause. Did you not know, or did you not want to know? Silence. Then a long breath on her end. "You've always made things harder than they needed to be, Claire." I smiled, just a little. "No, Mom. I just finally stopped making things easy for everyone else." I hung up. That was the last time we spoke. I didn't send angry texts. I didn't block her on everything. I just stopped participating, stopped explaining, stopped performing. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't owed. Peace, however, that was mine to claim. Months passed. Spring bloomed, then summer. I bought a house, not big, not flashy. A little place with a porch, a lemon tree, and enough space for air to move freely. I painted the walls soft gray, put wind chimes outside, started planting herbs on the windowsill. I slept better than I had in years. One afternoon in December, I lit a fire in the living room. My first fireplace, my first home, mine. I made cocoa, sat on the floor, Let the warmth settle into my spine. Outside, it began to snow. I didn't think about that Christmas last year. I didn't need to. This one was mine. No one had to open the door for me, because I had already walked through it. The day I changed my last name was quiet. No ceremony, no dramatic goodbye. Just paperwork, a notary, and a signature that felt like reclaiming the final piece of myself. I chose something simple, nothing symbolic or poetic, just a name that belonged to no one else. Something I didn't have to share with the people who had used my old one like a leash. It felt like taking off a coat that had grown too heavy. Later that afternoon, I drove to a lake just outside the city, a place I used to visit as a child, where Dad once taught me to skip stones before he stopped showing up altogether. I sat on the same bench, now cracked and sun-bleached, and watched the water ripple under the winter sky. Memories came, uninvited but soft. Mom singing along to Fleetwood Mac. Sophie's hands in mine during a school play. Ethan holding me after my first panic attack. But they didn't sting anymore. They didn't drown me. They just passed through like shadows on the surface of the lake. I let them go without trying to catch them. I'd spent so much of my life explaining pain, rationalizing betrayal, offering second chances that turned into 5th and 10th ones. But now, finally, I had stopped building doors for other people. I had started building my own. Within months, the blog grew into a small community, and from that, a new idea took shape. I launched a workshop, Boundaries and Balance, a space for women who had been erased inside their own families. We met online, then eventually in person. Strangers turned mirrors. We didn't talk about revenge. We talked about credit reports, therapy options, restraining orders, no contact scripts. We laughed more than I expected. We cried only when it mattered. One woman, a nurse from Arizona, said, "I didn't realize how much I needed permission to protect myself." Another whispered, "I always thought I was broken, but maybe I was just brave in the wrong place." At the end of each session, I would say, "If you can't walk through a door, build one." And they did, one by one. By the time December rolled around, I felt something stir, something warm, not nostalgia, not regret, just the quiet excitement of doing something for no one but myself. I planned a Christmas gathering, nothing big, no forced cheer, just a table, some fairy lights, cinnamon cookies, and people who didn't ask me to shrink. 3 people came, Danny from college, who never gave up on me even when I ghosted her, Alana, one of the women from the workshop, and Max, the 8-year-old who lived next door and believed I was a secret agent because I always wore black. We decorated cookies, we played old records, we laughed. I set a place for myself, not because I needed validation, but because it felt right. That night, as I cleaned up the last of the plates, a small envelope peeked out from under the door. No return address, no name. Inside was a card, handwritten in shaky block letters. "Dear Claire, I saw your story. My mom left me when I was little too. People say I'm strong, but it still hurts. Thank you for making me feel like maybe I can grow up okay. Love, Lena, 12 years old." I held the card to my chest, tears sliding down my cheeks, not from pain, but something gentler. A kind of healing I didn't know I still needed. I placed the card on the mantel, next to the candlelight. Then I poured myself a cup of cocoa, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and sat by the fire. The snow outside was soft and slow. There was no door I needed to knock on, no one I had to ask for space, just me, safe, whole home. Because sometimes being pushed out isn't the end. It's just how we learn to walk into the life we were meant for.